Okay, so if you're watching this, chances are you are either currently practicing or interested in some form of contemplative practice. Maybe it's meditation, maybe vipassana, maybe mindfulness, maybe centering prayer, lectio divina, self inquiry. Or maybe you've done something more physical like yoga or tai chi, but you have an intuition or a calling to move into something more contemplative. Or maybe you've just learned about the Christian mystics like Meister Eckhart or John of the Cross, and your interest was sparked by more intellectual pursuits. And we're finding, certainly in contemplative light, even more conservative churches and faith communities, there's a renewed interest in the contemplative tradition. So here's a question for you when it comes to contemplative practice. Where do you want to be in your spiritual path? Do you want to be free of problems? Do you want to solve a particular problem? Do you want to get closer to God as you understand Him? Or are you trying to be responsive to this internal call you can't quite name? In our experience, there are a couple of issues that people tend to be struggling with as they come to contemplative practice. So the first of that is disillusionment. Some of us are raised in a faith background of whatever stripe and develop the fixed understandings and containers appropriate to that stage of life. But then our faith seems to butt up against the reality of life and we become disillusioned. Or maybe it's not even that dramatic. Maybe we just don't have a handle on a faith that's relevant to our everyday struggles as a modern adult. We don't have a coherent, relevant, applicable faith. Two, we get overstretched and hyperconnected. So let's face it, we're all addicted to screens. You're looking at one right now. Our attention is pulled in 100 different directions. We are overworked, over-caffeinated, over-opinionated. A lot of us are burned out. And we've mostly lost a sense of the sacred that's infused into everyday experience. And we don't have that ability to detach and find inner quiet. Three, the spiritual life has been deprioritized. So many of us are inspired by stories of faith from people we believe to be sort of truly spiritual. It could be pastors, missionaries, activists, teachers, healers, prayer warriors, people who dedicate their lives to the spiritual. And if you're an introvert like me, maybe the monastic path seems compelling. People that are dedicated to a life of prayer, dedicated to making every act some form, to participating in the divine transformation, entering into the silence of God. And you are finding the need to return to prioritizing the spiritual life, to put sort of first things first. Four, there's this loss of the sense of the sacred. When we're children, we have that sense of the sacred or mystery, what the Old Testament calls Yirat Adonai, or the astonishment before the mystery of creation and being. There's that awe and wonder, and maybe you dimly recall what it's like to be connected to that source and sort of deeply desire that restored connection that's been lost. We experience loss or challenge. We're somehow caught up or trapped in the whirlwind of our life. Maybe it's a bad marriage, a divorce, maybe challenges with a child, death in the family that's causing upheaval in your life. And maybe the faith community you've invested in has some kind of shakeup, or the pastor stepped down, or some other authority figure you admired was compromised somehow. And you're disoriented somehow and you want to get reoriented. Maybe it's even stronger. Maybe you have hit bottom in some way. Some of us in our lives have come face to face with our shadow, our ego, the false self in some fashion. We're given to angry outbursts, or have cheated on a spouse, or been fired for drinking, gotten in a car crash, or that something has let us know we can no longer continue the life we're currently living. And there's some kind of essential change that needs to take place, and we don't know how to do it. We've been hitting our head against the wall for years, and really need some true inner change. So whether it's something external, something internal, most of us need relief from noise and turmoil and tension in our lives. And for me personally, it seems like every time I come across someone who seems completely at peace with themselves, with others, where I have some intuitive sense of deep wisdom and exuding humility and love without being sheltered or naive, inevitably I seem to find out that these people engage in some sort of regular, committed, contemplative practice. So everything I mentioned earlier in the video, all the problems, all the issues, are addressed in some way by contemplative practice, but not necessarily in the way we might think on the surface. There's a change in our inner nature, there's a change in our inmost self as we expose it to the presence and action of the divine within. Thomas Merton put it this way. Contemplation is the highest expression of man's intellect and spiritual life. It is that life itself, fully awake, fully active, fully aware that it is alive. It is spiritual wonder. It is spontaneous awe at the sacredness of life and of being. It's a vivid realization of the fact that life and being in us proceed from an invisible, transcendent, and infinitely abundant source. Contemplation is above all awareness of the reality of that source. It knows the source obscurely, inexplicably, but with a certitude that goes beyond reason and beyond simple faith. It is a more profound depth of faith, a knowledge too deep to be grasped in images, in words, or even in clear concepts. But it's also not a painkiller or a simple solution to our immediate problems. It's a lot more subversive than that. Here's Merton again. Contemplation is no painkiller. It is a terrible breaking and burning of idols, a purification of the sanctuary, so that no graven thing may occupy the place that God has commanded to be left empty, the center, the existential altar, which simply is. So what does that have to do with you? So each of our life situations is unique. There's a unique sacrifice required to move forward in the spiritual life. There's a unique death that's required. As my friend Clint Salem says, we all have to die on the cross we least want to die on. But as Jesus himself says, unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a seed. But if it dies, it bears much fruit, and that's what we're after. And that's the experience, and that's the process of the contemplative life. When we hear things like that, we take it seriously, we can get uncomfortable. What might we have to get up? What will we get? And the answer to both, from a contemplative perspective, is simple. Everything. The benefits of meditation, for example, are well documented and scientifically verified, but as we consider in the contemplative path, meditation is really only the surface. We're really after the gradual turning over of the self to the divine life. No longer I live, but Christ lives in me. And that's the experience of the contemplative. So yes, there's a death. Yes, we have to confront our shadow. Yes, we have to give up our emotional programs for happiness. But on the other side of that, there's balance and equanimity, a state of acceptance, a grace for self and other, what contemplatives call theosis or divine union. There's this total inner transformation, and that is the mystical journey, and that's the contemplative path. And so, in our next video, we'll explain why we stay locked in negative patterns, why we struggle to get rid of them so much, and how contemplative practice can help free us from those. And I'm curious about your experience. Did any of the issues mentioned above resonate with you? What issues are you struggling with? So let us know in the comment section below what sparked your interest in contemplative practice to begin with. And stay on the lookout for that second video, and take a look at the bonus download. It might help facilitate and spark some ideas for you. And I will see you soon. Be well.